main focus of this week is to introduce you to the subject. So, as I mentioned, a number of you know me, but there are some people who don't. So just to introduce myself, my name's Moira. I'm Dr. Moira Sherry, and I've been at UTS for some time now. I came from industry, so I spent much of my career in industry, and in 2010 decided to come and do my PhD, and I graduated in 2011. I graduated in February of 2015 and have been a lecturer and working at UTS ever since I started my PhD, so I've been here for some time. But my industry background was predominantly in the travel and tourism and service sector, and I was responsible for implementing large industry and cross-industry technology projects. So I have a good understanding of what is required and what is required and what are the drivers, what are the barriers of implementing large-scale technology projects. But really, for this subject, what we're going to be interested in is what drives these technological changes. What are the trends that are behind, the changes, the driving force? Why is it that people are going to invest money, spend time, be focused on these different technologies? Why is there such a big move to this digital transformation? We have to understand what's behind it in order for us to appreciate things such as timing, the level of investment, the impetus for these changes. And the other thing that we're going to look at are these new and emerging technologies. And next week, we're going to define some of the technologies, whether it's an assistive technology, whether it's an enabling technology, whether it's an emerging technology, whether it's disruptive technology, so that when you're thinking about the technology, you can see where it fits within this different technological landscape. The other thing that you need to be aware of when we're talking about technologies, we often talk about one technology. Oh, I want to do blockchain, or I'm interested in artificial intelligence. But actually, it's how the technologies work together that brings this strength or these competitive areas together. So often we will talk about a bundle of technologies or a block of technologies. And what we're talking about here is how the different technologies combine together and integrate in order to deliver much more value than one of the technologies on their own. So you need to be aware that there's the technology and the interactions between the technology as well. It's not just one technology. And of course, I've mentioned earlier that it's the technology, it's the business problem that the technologies are going to solve that is the important, the important thing to understand. Now, when we're talking about, implementing these new technologies, particularly when we're talking about implementing it across, different supply chains, we actually have to make sure that there is a technology readiness. We have to understand whether a people have got, the capacity or the capability, whether they are primed to take this technology and to understand what the implications are, to understand how the technology should be implemented. Then we talk about technology adoption. And when we're talking about technology adoption, we're going to be talking about trying to understand how do we get people to not just buy the technology or to sign up to the technology, but how do we actually make sure that they use the technology? And once we get into this technology adoption timeframe, we then think about what happens after they've adopted the technology. And there are different scenarios that can play out. And we're going to look at those, at these different types of adoption as we go through. Now, we've already spoken and you've already mentioned that when we're talking about supply chains, it's not just, one organisation, but it's how the supply chain interacts and is integrated. So the technology integration, not just with different technologies, but across organisations. How does the technology enable different business processes and different business functions happen across different organisations in a very seamless manner? And we're going to look at some of those things and some of those issues, and how do we go about implementing technology integration. We're going to look to see what is the impact that digital transformation has had on business models. Organisations have had to fundamentally change how they perceive themselves. They've had to fundamentally rethink how they add value. How are they going to charge and add value to their customers and or the other people that they do business with, their suppliers, upstream and downstream. And the other thing that we need to consider, particularly because of the type of technology that's these new and emerging technologies, what is the future of technology in supply chains and in society? How is technology changing the way that we live and work? And what are the impacts on that? We talk about robots and whether robots are going to be taking the jobs of employees. We're talking about totally integrating different organisations into a new form called a distributed autonomous organisation, where the whole management process is event-driven and is run by computers. And we're going to be looking at some of these things as well. So they are the topics that we're going to cover. But the subject has 3 assessments. So does anyone have any questions on that before we move? Okay. So with this particular subject, there are 3 assessments. The first assessment is I'm going to get you to develop an industry case study, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, I want you to really look at and pick an industry, and you've got a selection of industries there, or you can choose one of your own if you have, if you're working in a particular area or have an interest in a particular industry. But from that, you're going to need to research the industry, understand what the supply chain looks like in that industry. You're going to understand what some of the business problems are and what are some of the supply chain management strategies that may be used to overcome or address those business problems. And then when we look at new and emerging technologies, you're going to think about or come up with an appropriate technology to be able to satisfy or to address that particular business problem. So we are going to link the functioning of the industry and the industry supply chain with specific problems that are happening and occurring within that industry. You're going to think about the impact and how the supply chain might work to strategize and to address these business problems, and look to see what technology and how that technology or bundle of technologies might in fact help or address that business problem. Once we do that, then the next assignment is going to be a group assignment. And what you're going to do here is you're going to critically analyse some of these implementations. So you're going to pick one of the technologies that you and industries that you've been doing as individuals, and you're going to pick one of them and you're going to work together as a group to now come together and say, what would need to happen in order for us to do some technology readiness assessment to be able to understand what some of the drivers are, what some of the challenges are, how are we going to go about getting this technology implemented in this particular industry. And you'll work together as a group on that. The other thing, then we've got assignment, and that's worth 30%. So those two assignments are worth 30%. The first one being an individual assignment, the second one being a group assignment. And then the third assignment is about looking at the long-term focus. This is when we're going to think about what is the impact? What is the long-term impact? What does this mean 10 years from now? What does this mean for employees? What does it mean for economies? What does it mean for our society? How might the world be different if and when this technology is more widely adopted? Because this is what you need to be preparing for. You're not studying here just for, the next 2 or 3 years. You're studying here for your career. And so I really want you to be able to push forward, 5, 10 years to be able to imagine and think about what the long-term impact may be from the technology and the implementation processes that are happening at the moment. Now, you must attempt all assessment tasks. This subject does have an attendance. So, you can't just think that you're going to get through by, not doing very much. You need to be focused and be diligent about the assessment items. So when we're talking about the first assessment, what you're going to need to do is you're going to be developing a digital strategy. So you're going to be, thinking about an industry, working out how it works, understanding what the supply chain for that industry is. You need to be able to identify some of the problems, as I've mentioned. You're going to critically analyse new and emerging technologies. And as you go through and you're doing some reading and you're searching for different articles and things like that, what you will find is that different technology solutions will rise to the surface. So you would need to get a couple of those technologies and then pick one of them, or one bundle of technologies and how that's going to work together to address an appropriate problem. And you're going to map the industry problem with the emerging technology. So you're going to talk about how it's likely to address that problem, and you're going to justify, that your selection through the benefits that you can see that technology is going to deliver. The requirement is for 2,000 words, and it's going to be due on the 3rd of September. So you've got about a month. So next week, we're going to be talking about situating the subject within the broader, what's happening in the business space, in the society that these technologies are likely to impact. Then you've got 2 weeks where we're just going to be focused on, the business problem and the technology, where you'll be working together to define what some of these are, and then you'll have a week to write it up. So basically there's a month before you've got to hand in your first assignment. With the second assignment, what you need to do is you need to be able to demonstrate that you are going to be able to effectively implement a technology. So you're going to need to really understand what the challenges and the strategies that are used for particular technology in a particular industry, because they will be different. And then you need to think about what are the key tasks to successfully implement something, this new technology. Then you're going to need to plan that out, and you're going to need to make some recommendations to me as a manager, is what is the next steps that I would take to be able to, get this technology into place. That's a group assignment. It's 3,000 words and it's due on Friday, the 1st of October, and that's also worth 30%. But all the way through, really what you should, this is about your group work. So just in terms of forming groups, once your group's formed, you can't change. I'm going to put and I actually already have it up there, a list of whoever's in the class. You need to collectively work with each other. If you know who you want to work with, you just put your name and the group number, next to your name. And then by week 4, if you haven't finalised your group, I will assign you to a group, and that's it. You stick with that group and you do what that's done. The group, you'll need to, there's a cover sheet. Fill out the cover sheet, you submit your report after submitting it to Turnitin. So most of you will be familiar with this particular process. But what's going to be important is that you form groups as quickly as possible. Okay, so that you've got some understanding of how each of you are going to work and what your strengths are and how you can contribute. The last and final assignment is actually about thinking about and really coming to grips and understanding what's the long-term impact of these new technologies in a business and social context. So here I want you to critically review and analyse the literature, and I want you to make judgments and begin to make recommendations on the impacts, positive and negative. Think about, what does it actually mean? Are we going to have less jobs? Do we have, are we going to lose skills? Are we going to, fundamentally change the way that some of our services are being delivered? And what might that look like? So that particular assignment is worth 3,000 words, not 3,000 works, but 3,000 words. And it's due on Monday, the 25th of October, which is in fact the last week that we would be together. And it's worth a total of 40%. So some of the other important aspects are, turn it in. I can't stress enough. I've changed the assessments slightly from what they were last year, to make sure that people aren't going to pick up other people's assignments. I do take plagiarism seriously, so I'm not expecting to get any. But if I do see plagiarism, it will be escalated and reported accordingly. I've already mentioned that you must attempt all 3 of the assessment items, and in order to pass the subject, you must get a minimum of 50% to pass the subject. And I will be enforcing a compulsory attendance. The fact that we are going to be doing lots of discussions and I've got lots of collaborative work, it's not fair if you don't attend and you don't, contribute and participate in the class. So I am going to be quite strict on the attendance. I'm talking about, tutorials, but as I mentioned, I will be intertwining, the learning and the activities. So you must participate both in the individual and group tasks. I will be putting up, readings and things for you to not just read, but read, think, contemplate, reflect, so that when you do come to class, you can actually participate in the discussion. And that's what's going to make the subject interesting. And I don't care if we debate, whether something's good or bad. I've heard people rave about robots and I've heard people absolutely, want to trash them. And there's no right or wrong. But what is important here is that we canvass the different thinking and the different viewpoints, in order for us to stretch our own thinking about such an important topic that's going to have such impact on the way that we live and work. We don't just have a tunnel vision and think that all of the technology is going to be good, because whilst a lot of it is going to challenge and can in fact have some negative impacts. So you can source and collect information, to finish your tasks. I am expecting for you to collaborate and engage. I want you to be able to write down your findings and share your findings from your reading and also from the discussions that we have in class. It is going to require you to be thinking. So, as I mentioned, I will have some pre-learning material, which, again, I'm expecting you to look at, to read, to think about, reflect before you come to class so that you are ready to participate. Okay, and they will be uploaded and made available on a weekly basis. So what I'd like for us to do just now is to think about, how has technology changed our lives? What does it mean for business? And what are some of the new and emerging technologies that you've observed? Any questions? Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop share. I'm just going to stop my screen sharing. If nobody else has any questions, I'm going to say good night, and we'll see you online next week.